Thanks, Irene, and thank you, Regulation Asia, for organizing this fantastic summit. My name is Neil Vaz. I am a customer and digital identity risk specialist at Refinitiv. My day-to-day job involves working with regulators, law enforcement agencies, fintechs such as VASPs to build robust customer due diligence tools to prevent things like sanctions busting, to prevent things like terrorism financing and money laundering through the financial system. Uh, Today, I'll be talking a little bit about sanctions risk and how it particularly applies to cryptocurrencies. But I also want to give you an overall landscape on how sanctions are changing and how they've changed over time and where they're heading going forward as well. So I wanted to begin today's presentation by really just giving you two very simple stats, 46,131 and 554. Some of you may be wondering what these numbers are. Some of you may already know what these numbers are. But let's just start with the first number. Given the fact that we're talking about sanctions today, there's no prizes for guessing. The first number relates to the total number of sanctioned individuals and organizations globally. I've also heard at times this number seems a little bit small. Are you sure you have it right? Actually, this number is deduplicated. If you look at all the names that appear on all sanctions lists globally, that list goes into the hundreds of thousands. But this 46,000 number is deduplicated. And what about the smaller number, this 554? Believe it or not, and this was a surprise to me, 554 represents the total number of sanctioned cryptocurrency wallet addresses globally. I'll say that again. 554 is the total number of sanctioned wallet addresses. I was expecting this number to be much higher, as I'm sure you were as well. And for maybe some of the compliance officers here working for VASPs, you must be thinking, oh, that's great. I only have to think about 554 wallet addresses to comply with sanctions. And unfortunately, life isn't that easy. You not only have to look for these 554 wallet addresses, but you also need to consider these 46,000 sanctioned individuals as well. And on top of that, you also need to consider who their associates are and who their affiliates are as well. So let's just look at how sanctions have evolved over the past 6 years. We've seen, from around less than 19,000 sanctioned parties in 2017, that number has ballooned to over 46,000 today. That represents a 243% growth in the number of sanctioned designated individuals or companies. And not only that, there have been recent regulations or sanctions programs that also try to extend the sanctions not only to the sanctioned individual, but to their family members and their associates as well. And that in turn brings up the conversation around explicit sanctions and implicit sanctions. A lot of times when you hear people talking about sanctions, you only hear about, oh yeah, I screened the OFAC list, oh, I screened the UN Security Council list, and that's it, I'm done with my sanction screening. But there's a lot more to sanction screening than just that. So to break that down for you, let's split the world of sanctions into two buckets. One is explicit sanctions and the other one is implicit sanctions. Explicit sanctions are the sanctions lists that are easily available. They're the ones that you can go to the OFAC website or you can go to the UN website, simply download these lists because they identify specific individuals or companies. Implicit sanctions are a lot more tougher than that. Implicit sanctions are those parties or individuals that may be considered as sanctioned simply by a narrative statement. So if you look at US executive orders, for example, you'll see things like company ABC and all of its affiliates are hereby sanctioned under that specific executive order. What that executive order does not do is it doesn't tell you who those affiliates are. That onus lies on you as someone who needs to comply with sanctions. And it can be quite tough because unless you have in your team people who speak Korean, who speak Spanish, who speak Farsi, who speak Arabic, and you have access to ownership records globally, it's very tough to actually identify who these implicitly sanctioned individuals or organizations are. Uh, Take, for example, CATSA as well. If you're not familiar with CATSA, I'd encourage you to go and read about it. CATSA stands for Countering of America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. And you'll see a lot of that, especially with what's going on right now between Russia and Ukraine. You'll see further enforcements or further sanctions packages coming out through this as well. And what CATSA tries to do is it tries to sort of build a PEP and relatives and close associates relationship to a sanctions program. So not only, for example, are the oligarchs sanctioned, their relatives are also sanctioned as well by extension of the implicit statement. And that can be a huge challenge for compliance officers to identify. Let's just take, for example, staying on Russia, let's look at Russian sectoral sanctions. If you look at Russian sectoral sanctions, out of the total universe of people who are deemed to be sanctioned under this regime, only 5% of them have actually been mentioned or named. The 95% of them are considered implicitly sanctioned simply by their association to the sanctioned party. So this is something I spend a lot of time with my VASP clients with, trying to explain that maybe you're missing the forest for the trees. And maybe you need to broaden your horizons on your sanction screening program to not only look at explicit sanctions, but also look at this very important and, quite frankly, overlooked area of sanction screening, which is implicit sanctions. Esteban earlier gave some very good examples on how nation states are evading sanctions using cryptocurrencies. He was very right to point out that laundering through cryptocurrencies is very difficult because it's highly traceable. But what about right at the beginning of that chain? What about actually identifying whether a person is sanctioned or not when they're opening a relationship with your VASP? If you don't identify that they're sanctioned, it's you're going to pretty much have an unknown when you're tracing their transactions through the blockchain. But I digress. So let's look at North Korea, for example. With North Korea, Esteban again mentioned the Lazarus Group. Lazarus Group is, if you haven't heard of them before, they're the same people who were responsible for the Bangladesh Fed heist in 2016, where they tried to steal $1 billion. They're the same guys who are allegedly responsible for the WannaCry attacks as well, that was responsible for billions of dollars worth of damage. And they have now shifted their focus towards cryptocurrencies. Just last year, Chainalysis has reported that they were responsible for stealing over $400 million worth of crypto assets. And they're using very, very complex and well-funded methods to evade detection. They're not only using cross-chain transactions, but they're also using potential shell fronts around the world. And identifying those organizations that they're using or those entities that they're using poses a massive challenge. This presentation wouldn't be a sanctions presentation if I didn't mention what was happening in Russia right now. Just a few minutes ago, if you read the news, President Putin has military action in Ukraine. And we know from what President Biden has been saying over the past few days that he has a major sanctions package waiting on the lines should an event like this occur. So I would expect within the day that there'd be new sanctions imposed against Russia. And we've heard what the Russians will want to do should these sanctions get placed. We've heard about potential moves towards cryptocurrencies. In fact, recent reporting has shown that a lot of stolen assets from things like ransomware do find their way into Moscow-controlled VASPs. And the question then is, what are we doing as an industry to actually not only identify these VASPs or their owners, but what are we doing to actually make sure they don't enter the financial system or our VASP industry through other means? Similarly, we're seeing with Iran where Bitcoin mining is actually a recognized licensed activity. and the fact that any Bitcoin mined in Iran has to be sold back to the central government. This is how Iran is using cryptocurrencies to monetize their natural resources as well. So, given the fact that you're dealing with a state-sponsored and highly targeted campaign to use cryptocurrencies, or this industry rather, to potentially evade sanctions, what are the tools that you have? What are the tools that you can look for to prevent this activity from happening? And this is just an overall view of some of the tools that you can use. These are 5 different approaches that have been recommended by many different bodies, including FATF, including OFAC. These are considered as the universal tools. There's no one-stop shop to prevent sanctions, but if you use a combination of these tools, you stand a fighting chance. And we'll start with my favorite topic, sanction screening. Are you building a sanction screening tool that allows you to screen for both explicit sanctions and implicit sanctions? Are you using things like fuzzy logic to look for naming variations? Another one is sources of funds or ultimate beneficial ownership. For example, if a corporate comes to open an account with your VASP, do you know who the ultimate owner is of that company? And are they potentially implicitly sanctioned as well? We heard about synthetic ID theft or ID theft earlier in presentations. Are you building automated tools to prevent things like document tampering, to prevent things like ID theft? Another one that was also spoken about was cross-chain analytics, looking at that money flow, looking at where your customers receiving funds from. Are they coming from potentially risky counterparties? And I feel like the biggest move in our industry so far will definitely be the travel rule. We heard David Pele talk about this earlier, and I personally feel that this is one of the biggest fighting chances we have towards preventing not only sanctions, but just generally bad actors from entering the cryptocurrency space. There's obviously challenges in there. Things like false positives becomes quite a challenge when you're dealing with only name as the identifier. You also need to look at, is the database that you're using, does it comply to data privacy requirements? Because you're, at the end of the day, sharing personally identifiable information as well. So these are some of the thoughts that you need to think of when building your customer due diligence program. And if you want to find out how we're helping our customers onboard millions, just 10 million last year, in an automated fashion, do come to our booth and I'll be happy to talk to you more. But with that, Manesh, I think you're waiting on the sidelines.
Thanks so much, Neil. Really interesting conversation. We have a couple minutes, so maybe just a few questions, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
So earlier, of course, I moderated a session on the travel rule, and we touched on sanction screening briefly. But I guess in your opinion, given that sanction screening is such a vital part of the travel rule, can you talk a little bit about how, I guess for VASPs that are really getting into this space, it might be something a bit newer to them than it would be for traditional financial institutions. Can you talk a little bit about what VASP virtual asset service providers can do to reduce the screening burden, make it more automated, address the problem that you and I have heard about for many, many years about false positives. Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. I think the biggest tool you have against false positives is the collection of good quality data. So name is not enough for doing sanction screening or any anti-money laundering screening. You need to be able to collect things like date of birth or nationality or even gender to be able to reduce that false positive burden. And there's tools out there that'll actually help you automatically weed out the false positives depending on those identifiers that you're providing. So being able to, number one, collect that information and then make sure the service that you're using has that information on the background to help you screen against it is the biggest fighting chance you have against false positives.
Okay, cool. I guess you also spoke about implicit sanctions in your presentation. How are you guys sort of addressing that challenge? I suppose it's about to get even more complicated with the Russia sanctions. I was reading about and we've covered it as well, but sort of the sanctions against some of the banks as well as their subsidiaries, and the 50% rule will apply when it comes to OFAC. So I guess just generally speaking, how are you dealing with implicit sanctions?
That's a fantastic question, and it's something we spend a lot of resources and a lot of time in tackling. So we have a team that's focused specifically around sanctions. They work 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's a team that's quite large and they're based all over the world. And their only job is to first of all look at changes in sanctions regime, and then also go down the rabbit hole to actually identify these related parties. So people that may be associated under the OFAC 50% rule, people who may be associated under CATSA 228, which is the familial relationships to a sanctioned person as well. We actually have a team that not only speaks all of these languages where these sanctions may apply, but they're also highly trained in finding these related parties as well. So that's our approach. We actually put humans on the ground to identify these people. It's you can automate some of this, but at the end of the day, human know-how trumps all.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, it's quite a complex space. I've heard about sort of some financial institutions trying to sort of gather all of this data themselves in the past, and it just kind of doesn't work. You need those kind of people on the ground. You need the resources to be able to handle that. Thank you so much, Neil, for your time today and for kind of sharing your insights. It's been a really interesting to listen to them.
My pleasure. Sorry, just one last thing before I go. We're very excited, and we will be announcing this officially, but you saw Pele earlier from Nota Bene, and we're very excited to announce that we are partnering with Nota Bene to actually enable sanction screening through their solution. So what VASP can look forward to is actually a travel rule tool that also does sanction screening as well in one package. So watch this space for more.
Thank you. I didn't know if I was allowed to mention that, but I'm glad you did. Yeah, thanks very much. It will be very interesting to see that, and certainly we can connect a bit further once we work out what's going on with the new sanctions being announced.
Absolutely.
Talk more about that.
Thanks, Manesh.
Thanks again, Neil, customer and third-party risk specialist for Refinitiv.